So we're here for the second episode of the Throw Show, and I'm here with Trevor Stutzman. Trevor, thanks for joining us.
That's good. How's it going, Dane?
I'm doing well. I am Dane Miller of Throws University and Garage Strength. So we're here to talk about throwing. That's why the name is the Throw Show. So, Trevor, what do you want to talk about?
Well, actually, last time for all of you, everyone who tuned in last week, we kind of focused a little bit more on my high school group and who was all in it, but you didn't really talk a whole lot about your post collegiates.
Right.
So I thought this would be a good time to go over who you have in your group right now, both on site and online, and kind of talk about where they're at this point in the season. Okay,
so I'll go over everybody that I have on off-site. Collegiately, so I do have one kid online who's in high school.
Yeah.
With Jacob Lemon.
Mm-hmm.
But then collegiately online, I have Sam Black, who is a multi-eventer, All-American last year indoors. Ryan Negevin, who's NCAA champion twice, once in the shot, once in the discus in Division III, and a couple other people. Post-collegiately, online, I work with Josh Sorochin, who's thrown 61 meters. Legend Boysen Hayes, who's somebody that we just picked up about 2 months ago, who was a D3 runner-up that I'm pretty excited about, and I'm excited for when Legend moves up here. I think he's like a diamond in the rough. I think he's like the grade A top, like one of those classic garage strength type throwers that's sort of just been pushed to the wayside and could really be developed.
Well, so this is the first year that he's actually throwing.
Just throwing.
Yep. Just throwing.
And not played football.
Yeah.
And to go off of that, I do have Cam Yon on in the collegiate ranks as well, which I owe him a couple technical analysis I need to do. That reminds me. But then along with Legend, Josh, and then Alex Rose, who's a 2016 Olympian. He's been throwing really well actually the last week and a half, and he's got a meet. I believe it's this weekend out of Grand Valley. He's hosting a meet, so I'm hoping he can actually put out a decent mark pretty early on. And then Monique Riddick is 1889 is her best in the shot. She's finished top 10 in the world. I think last year she was top 12 in the world. So she comes up. She's going to try and start coming up once a month, and she's hoping that over the next 2 months she starts coming up twice a month. She and I have had this turning of the page of our coaching athlete relationship, where she's after this past year, I had a good long talk with her. And we just laid it all out. And now she and I have a meeting every Monday and Friday. And we talk about that week of training, and then she comes up. So that's going really well. We're on week 4 of doing that, and that's one of the keys with when you're coaching people off site, just that good communication. And then on top of that, we've got we've got Orazio Cremona, who's a South African shot putter, a 20-meter guy, who I believe's capable of 21 mid. He's actually thrown 21, I think, once. But I believe he can be a 21 mid guy, and he's coming off a little bit of a calf injury that he had, but I think he's gonna have a pretty good showing this year. And then on site we've got Rachel Fatherly, Noah Kennedy White, who's in and out, Sam Mattis, who's here full time along with Rachel, and then Lucas Warning. So we've got a really good group of athletes, off site and on site. And at this point in the year, the biggest focus is all hammering the technical aspects. So the way I sort of see and periodize everything is that I want to see lots and lots and lots of technical throws, technical movements that are going to create a very strong imprint on the nervous system, so that when we get into the thick of the season, we can just give little simple cues And those little simple cues can create that simple tweak to their technique, and then they can take that and compete very well. And they have so much confidence in their technique that's ingrained in them. So it's sort of like, we don't spend this fall time running. We don't spend this fall time getting in shape. We don't spend the fall doing anything except for honing in our technique as well as we can, taking tons and tons, 200 to 300 throws a week, along with getting stronger, getting more explosive, and just working mobility, stuff like that, so that when we get outdoors in the spring, everybody's ready to rock. So that's sort of where we're at. I would say that Rachel's at light years ahead of where she was last year, light years times 10 ahead of where she was 2 years ago. She's at a really exciting point. Legend's at a pretty good point. He's starting to comprehend technique, and that's even without him being on site. Alex is at a good point. He's starting to really figure out how to balance his job and training and being married and all the adult type things that come with being 26 years old. And Cyro's at a pretty good spot as well, where he's transitioning to having this coaching job, and he's learning how to work with his throwers and how to work. And I actually think that is sort of helping him as an athlete as well. So Noah looked good today. Lucas looks good. You know, most of the time it's just getting him into a good mental state and having him feel good physically, and he competes very well. But Sam, I think right now is in. I've been like the last 3 weeks watching Sam on a regular basis. I mean, I've been telling you for the last couple of weeks, like he just looks really good. Mm-hmm. He started really he and I think he and Rachel are on the same wavelength, where it's like they get it. They understand the technical model I want them to be, and they understand what that even feels like. Yeah. And I think that's where it's exciting for me, because it's. And even with Sam's, you know, we got this new training template I've been using, and with Sam's weights even, I've been putting in daily goals for him. And I just think that's really helping he and I work even tighter together. So I'm, you know.
Well, with like the technical aspect of that too, like they've been, both Sam and Rachel, they've been here for, is this their second, third year?
This is exactly their second year. Yeah. So Sam sort of moved here right after the trials, like within like a month after the trials, whereas Rachel moved here in 2016. So Rachel moved here in the end of August of 2016. So this is like exactly 2 year point. And
well, that's where like I feel like they've both kind of undergone some pretty significant changes to their technique.
Yeah.
And like at this point, like really seeing them get comfortable with that technique, you know, and it has taken like, you know, it's taken a little while, but I feel like this is when all that work that they put in
it's gonna start paying off.
2 years is really going to start paying off for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the whole, you know, talking with Rachel even, it's been, yeah, it was 6 months before she even understood what I was even talking about, you know, and with Sam, because Sam can get so closed up to outsiders, for he and I, like we've always worked pretty well together, but in the beginning it was still like, well, I don't know if I really want to do that, and which is fine when you're as good as he was, as good as he is, you know. So then over time and showing them examples and working through those feelings and working through various positions, and now like, dude, Sam's left leg, when he comes out of the back, it's starting to get really quick. And if he can have his left leg as fast as Nick Arrhenius' left leg, when his right hits, that left's past it, but it's low, so Nick's is a little higher. If Sam can achieve that speed with it lower and then control his left arm, which he's just starting. We've been working slow throws with a heavy implement, and he's just starting to figure out how to control that left side. And everything's starting to click, and it's like, you know, it's not every rep that he's using that left, and it's not every rep that left leg's landing exactly where I want, or that he's opening it well out of the back. But he's really got about 3 aspects right now that we're really trying to perfect, and dude, he looks good. Like, he looks really good. I'm excited. I'm excited to see what these guys do at Grand Valley. I want to see how they throw indoors. And I even told Sam jokingly yesterday, depending upon what he throws at Grand Valley indoors, I would be cool with trying to get him. Like I would tell him like, yo, get in contact with your agent. Let's self-fund us going over to the ISTOF meet and tell him like you're gonna come over and you're just gonna compete indoors and they don't even have to pay, but you want to try and win the money.
Yeah.
Because I think he's at that point. I think he can take out a lot of big name guys.
Yeah.
I think there's very few European guys that can beat him now. Mm-hmm. There's still guys there that are going to beat him, but I think he can hang with the best in the world.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty excited, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, also I feel like, just like thinking forward towards like the Grand Valley meet in general, like that's been awesome. Building every year.
Yeah. Last year was incredible.
Like more people, more talents coming every single year. And I feel like it's going to keep growing, and that's just going to build up the guys who are already there as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, absolutely. So I've got a handful of questions from a very special elite collegiate shot putter. And he spelled example wrong on here, but that's okay. But I wanted to go over some of these things because I even think some of these answers you and I might differ on, which is going to be interesting. Maybe we can fight each other. So let's see how many we can get through because I think there's some very solid questions. So can training consume too much of your life? That's on
this
you.
Is probably what
that's on you, Trevor.
We differ on. I think obviously it depends on the kind of person you are. Like, I don't know. I can go both ways. Like, I think it can, but for certain people, like I feel like there are people that have like really obsessive personalities, and once they're like in something and they're ingrained in something, it can just completely take control of their life and they basically just shut everything else out. And I think for those people, it can, like, whether or not it's impacting their training, it's most likely impacting the rest of their life in a certain way. And eventually, if the rest of their life is, not going well, that's going to come full circle and probably come around and impact their training again.
Yeah.
So I think, like, obviously you always say that there's a balance between everything, but I think, making training your highest goal in your life, I don't think is a bad thing, but, make sure you're not sacrificing, other important things like family, friends, your schooling, because eventually that's going to come back and you're going to wish you had those things once you're done competing.
So I think I have a similar answer, but with a similar explanation with a different answer.
Okay.
So my answer would be no, it cannot. But with the comprehension that totally being engulfed in training, you have to comprehend that there's the technical side, and it's fine if you do technical research and you understand movement and all that, and then there's the training portion and the strength side of training and throwing. So you're going to throw, you're going to train, and then there's the recovery side, mobility work, doing Normatec, meditating, doing yoga, doing nutrition, and taking care of all those little pieces is extremely important, and it has to be measured out and weighed out, and everything's got to be set up, and that it's also part of this puzzle is challenging yourself with other external motivators. So for my example, I want to use myself is that, as a business owner, I might work 12 to 14 hours a day, but I'll still go home and do a technical analysis because it's fun. I'll still go home and read, 30 chapters out of a book that I'm reading about because it's helping me in other ways. It's helping me with a relationship. It's helping me with my wife. It's helping me with the kids. But it's also going to help me with my business too. And I think that's important, that if you look at training, the way it needs to be looked at as this holistic vehicle. And right now you're so engulfed in it with the nutrition, with the training, with studying training, with recovery methods, and then having these relationships. Having positive relationships with your family will make training better. And if you see your family as part of training, and if you see these other avenues and stimulating your brain in other ways and doing meditation and handling stress properly, if you see that stuff as part of training, I don't think it's a negative thing. I think it can be a very positive thing. And I just think it's very important that like and I think it's okay that everything would be a part of that. I think that even you get to the point where it's like, you know, I think about somebody like Jordan Burroughs, and he's got 3 kids, and he's a world champion, Olympic champion, and it's like, you know, I just watched a whole interview with him, and he's like, it's different. You know, I got to take my kid to school, and then I got to go train, and then I got to pick my kid up from school, and then I gotta train again after they go to bed, and then when they go to bed, I'm studying movement and stuff like that on the mat, but it's all that stuff's factored into training. So I don't know if that maybe it's a roundabout answer.
I mean, it's kind of like, I feel like we're saying
the same thing.
Same things. It's just like whether, just the approach to it. Because I mean, no matter what, like you can't have good training if the rest of your life is out of control and isn't, you know, your friends and family aren't supporting you and stuff like that. So it's like whether you're using training to help your social life or using social life to help your training. Either way.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. It is
find us a good one.
Okay, so recovering mentally from a down season, understanding how you should feel physically at different times of the training year. Do I need to go to big meets to throw big?
Pick one of those.
Recovering mentally from a down season. I think that's an interesting question or even just statement, because it's sort of one of those things is what's a down year? What's did you not PR by 2 meters and you only PR'd by a half a meter? You know, right. And I think that the mental side, you know, recovering mentally from a down season, what I would say is, do you take a step back and look at everything and say, well, I didn't drink this year. You know, I didn't stay up till 12:30 in the morning every night. I didn't do, you know, I was eating very cleanly. I was training twice a day. I was doing my Normatec and mobility and recovery. I was doing ROMWAD. I was doing absolutely everything I could do. I was meditating. I was praying, whatever you want to do. I was taking care of all that, and I still didn't PR. Well, you're in a tough situation. Then you have to really start to analyze your technique, and that's ultimately what it does go back to. Is, well, there's a logical reason behind why you're not throwing farther, and it's either your technique or you're weaker. You're too weak. Mm-hmm. You're not strong enough. But if on top of that you're sitting there and you didn't have that good of a year, maybe you only PR'd by 10 centimeters, and you're frustrated because you feel like you did everything, but then when you reevaluate where you're at, you were still drinking once a week. Mm-hmm. You were still staying up till 1 a.m. You weren't going to bed on time. You weren't waking up with those goals in mind heading into training. You're going into training, and the first 20 minutes of training, you're, you know, bullshitting around talking about stupid stuff that can distract you from training. Well, that's going to lead. That's the stuff that needs to get weeded out. And the better you get as an athlete, and the higher the level of throwing that you want to get to, the more you have to weed through all that and say, okay, well, I need to start. Now I got to stop drinking twice a week. I'm going to start drinking once a week. Then it's, okay, now I'm not going to drink at all. Mm-hmm. Now I'm only going to drink once a quarter. Mm-hmm. Then the next step is, okay, now you take care of all that stuff, and then come back and say you haven't PR'd, because I guarantee you that's not going to happen. Yeah. So I think that's the way recovering mentally becomes. It's more about self-reflection and looking at yourself and where you can improve.
Absolutely. And that's I'm kind of thinking of like 3 things. So I kind of jumped right to having that self-reflection and looking back over the season, and it's like what could have went wrong? Like if you're feeling bad, I guess you could feel bad that you haven't done the things you think you could have. So with like how you prepared, how your training was, how your sleep, you know, social life, all that. There's like what you can't control, which is just your natural ability, I guess, or talent. Mm-hmm. And then there's things that other people control, which would be like, you know, how well your coach invested in you, and maybe like, you know, what facilities were around you to train at and stuff like that. So if those are like the 3 things, then like, yeah, look at that logically. Like, okay, well, first thing is accept who you are. Are you a Ryan Krauser? Are you a, Reese Hoffa who has this natural ability? Or are you, and then obviously you're you, and you need to accept that. And then it goes to, okay, what can I do to make my own training better, whether it's like all the things you mentioned. And then it's getting yourself into the right position with other people that they're going to help you succeed as well. And that even comes down to that, that's on you, that you have to put yourself in the position to succeed as well. And you need to find the place, whether it's in the country or, anywhere at a college, that you can succeed as well. And it's your responsibility as well to put yourself there.
Right.
I would say.
Yeah. All right. I want to go to the next question because this, I think, pertains to something you just posted on Instagram. Okay. Importance of training partner. What if I don't have one? I want you to answer first because you. I'm
trying to think what I just posted.
the video, the progress of you training without a coach.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I'm thinking, in the last couple years of my career, I did not have a training partner really, too. So I can sort of relate.
Yeah. I think that comes down like person to person. Like, honestly, for me, I feel like, I did the best. I competed the best I ever did when I didn't have a training partner. Mm-hmm. And I think it was that, now I did have a training partner for my first 2 years, Fred Fulton. And I think he fed off of me in a positive way, but and just my outlook on like that training situation, I kind of made that into a negative situation for myself. And I by comparing myself to him, and it was more about me, like what he was doing than what I was actually doing. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think it negatively affected me. But once I was on my own and I could basically do whatever I wanted, I knew that like every single thing I did, every single time I went out to throw, it was just 100% what I was doing. And I think I kind of fed off of that like, no one else is doing this for me. I'm doing this myself, and kind of that, I guess that taking pride in that a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that's what kind of helped me really go far. But I know that that's absolutely not the case for everyone, and probably, there's only a number of people that are like me. And I think maybe you're like that too. You can talk about that. I don't know. But
I think I'm like that. I think I go both ways. Yeah. I think I feed, and mainly because I was more mature later in my career. And actually, when I was in high school, I would go out and I would throw in my backyard for 3 hours, and I would just throw and throw and throw, and I wouldn't even think about anything. And I always wished when I was in college, I would be sitting there like, why can't I just throw? Like, why can't I just do what I did in high school? That's all I wanted to do. When I was in high school, all I did was throw. And I think that I feed off of other training partners more positively in the weight room, and then by myself more in the circle. But a couple things that helped me a lot with training with Dylan Armstrong, when you're training with someone who is at that level, 22-meter shot putter, dude, he would hit throws, and sometimes you'd be like, oh my God, like what the heck, I'm never gonna be like that. Mm-hmm. And clearly I was never like that. But I'd also sit there and be like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. Like be more patient in the middle while everything's moving quick around the middle. Like, oh, that's what it's supposed to look like. So that would help me. Seeing that elite level guy throwing that well. And I did train with John Calness, and John Calness was the absolute best training partner I ever had. He was the best in the circle because he was either hammering throws and getting after it and bringing everybody else up, or he was just level-headed, focusing on his technique, and he wouldn't care if he was throwing 50 feet. Mm-hmm. He'd be like, well, I don't care. All I'm doing is working on this. This is all I'm feeling. Mm-hmm. And he did, no matter what, he had a good attitude all the time. And then in the weight room, he was the best to be around. So I think it depends person to person. I think it depends on your outlook. I think ideally, you've got to, if you want to be one of the best in the world, I think you've got to be an athlete that can train by himself or can train with only one coach, right? And it's just you and the coach, and you can just worry about what's going on in your head and worry about how your body's moving. And if you don't, you don't need that external motivation and you don't need anything else going on, that's going to make you much better off long term when you get into those big comps, because you're going to get into the big comps and you're already self-motivated. You already know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good question on it, and I think it is, at the end of the day, it does come down person to person.
Yeah.
And even training partner. Some training partners
right.
are really good. Some of them are terrible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, is it necessary to take a full day off? Trevor's like, Dane, you have your guys train like 12 sessions a week.
Yeah, right. This is where I think this goes back to, I'm still standing by that, like, you need time to get away from track to kind of reset your. I think
you should take a day off. I'm not like that.
I know you're insane, and like, obviously no. But I do. Yeah, I would definitely think, say, taking a day off, not thinking about track or throwing on that day off, and just kind of doing whatever you feel like, as long as it's not impacting your training.
Right.
And I think that can help just kind of reset your mental outlook, like the next week.
And
training. Physically too.
Yeah.
And it's just like even if you're thinking about it, like, it's easy to be like, either you're thinking about a competition, your heart rate goes up, you start, getting a little tense, and all that just like will stay with you into the next week. And if you can just completely relax, completely kind of just, do nothing on a day, pretty much, I think that can help.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you should take a day off, for all the reasons that Trevor just pointed out. I think it's good to just hit a refresh. Mm-hmm. I think it's awesome. Big mental challenge. Technical thought. What would be the correct intensity? So this question would be, what would be the correct intensity in the circle? Okay, so are we going half speed? Are we going 90% where we're going all out pretty much? So research it, and Trevor, chime in and correct me if I'm wrong, but from my comprehension of studies and technical research is that the best technical improvements typically occur from 65% to 80% intensity ranges. And this has been studied quite a bit in Olympic weightlifting, and this is why if you study Russian journals and what they would do with their athletes, the Russian training system for Olympic weightlifting, it's like 80% of the volume is done between 70 and 80%. So doing triples, doing sets of 4. And so with me, and what I think with my athletes that we've been doing and talking with Trevor, coming up with these creative ideas, because we don't do a ton of drills, we'll throw heavy implements, which means it's going to slow down the intensity level a little bit. It's going to create a little bit better feeling with the technique. But then on top of that, I'll even throw in what I'll call slower throws. So like 50, 60, 65% throws. So the slow throws with a heavy implement where you're really just focusing on one or two technical aspects. And you might take 6 to 8 throws at 50 to 65% with a heavy implement, and focusing on those two aspects, you can really lead to good feeling, and then you start to hit it. And it's funny that this question's here, because I had this whole conversation with Jake, one of my Olympic weightlifters, today, because I was screaming at him going, dude, you don't use your warm-up sets to set your technique. And that's where it's got to be. And that's how throwing has to be. It has to be when you're warming up. You can't take this standing throw with terrible technique and then expect to have a good finish in your throw. You can't take your first 6 to 7 throws like crap just because they're lower intensity and you're warming up. Use those movements, those 7 to 8 warm-up throws, as a way to trigger everything and as a way to set in that proper technique. And then if it starts to feel good, maybe you raise the intensity just a little bit, and you start to play with where is that line that you lose the technical aspect, and where's the line that you regain it. Yeah,
I always think, and just so we throw out numbers like 65%, 85%. What does that actually
it's hard
mean?
to measure.
Like, what do you tell yourself? And I think a lot of times when you're in the back of the circle and you're like, okay, I'm not going all out. I'm taking this an easy throw. Like, what do you think about? And I kind of think it's, you got to feel relaxed. You got to feel, especially coming out of the back of the circle, that you're not trying and you're not like, trying to go fast. You're not trying to move your body fast, but pick that one thing that you're working on and try and execute that, and like hard, try and execute it hard, but try and execute it like fast as well. So it's like the whole feel of the throw is going to be kind of depressed, slower, but then try and just use that to hone in on that one thing and try and make that faster. Because usually, like, and
so clarify,
into
what you're saying is, say, like, okay, let's work on a wider right leg to the middle.
Yeah.
So you might be slow opening that left, but then you're hard with that right leg to the middle, and then the rest of the throw is just easier and a nice finish. Or you're focusing on that left leg getting down fast to the front. So maybe that right leg sweep out of the back is a little slower, but you pull off that left fast and get it down quickly, and then you finish slower.
Right.
So the speed is all created from that left leg, so you're really just focusing on that.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I think that's where you lots of times have huge throws.
Yeah.
Is when you in your mind, you're thinking this is an easy throw, but you execute that one thing harder and at the right time because it doesn't feel like you have to do everything at once. And just that one thing will trigger like a good feeling in the throw, and you'll end up smashing the finish without even thinking that you're going to smash the finish.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, so let's go into. Let's stay on the lines of throwing. How important is throwing different weighted implements? Is it more important to be explosive or strong? So, I believe it's extremely important to throw various weighted implements. And to be more explosive or strong, that's tough because it's one of those questions that it all depends on the person. We've had some athletes who are incredibly strong and they can't be explosive, and we've had some athletes who are incredibly explosive and they're not strong. And the overriding theme is, I guess it's not that tough of a question. The more explosive athlete is going to be the better thrower because it's easier to increase strength than it is to increase explosiveness, but that's more just based off of like rate coding of your muscle fibers and how rapidly you can recruit motor units genetically. I think most of the time that's genetically related. But if to clarify this, I think a lot of people, I think the question is like, okay, you're going to get strong if you're throwing a 20-pound shot, but if you're throwing a 6-kilo shot, which if our competition shot's a 16. You're going to be strong if you throw the 20, or you're going to be explosive if you're throwing the 6K. Right. And I think that's got to be clarified first, is that, throwing various weighted implements, there's more value than just you'll get strong throwing a heavy and you'll get fast throwing the light. That's not just how it works, and that's got to be clarified to begin with. But the reason why throwing various weighted implements is, it actually goes back to what we were just talking about with technique, is that you get different feelings, you get a different stimulus, you get a different trigger of proprioception from your nervous system. If I'm throwing a 2.5 in a discus versus throwing a 1.75, the feedback's going to be a little bit different, and it's going to help me with technique if it's a little bit heavier. But if my technique improves, I'm going to get faster too. So that that clarifies that having a heavy implement doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to just be strong. So and that's where, going into the weight room, especially in the United States, we've got all these different little tricks and maneuvers that we'll use to change defense mechanisms. So if you think about it as our body is this organism, and we make a defense mechanism to a stimulus, and that helps us get stronger. That helps us get more athletic. So we do all this stuff in the weight room, like eccentric hooks, chains, bands, box jumps, Olympic lifts, anything you can think of. But then we go out to the shot circle or the discus circle, and we throw the exact same implement year round. And it's like, you don't understand that, or people don't comprehend that when you mix up the pairings of implements, or if you throw a heavy implement in the morning and then the competitive implement in the afternoon, or if you throw heavy in the morning with a light shot and then in the afternoon, you create all these different pairings, and then that creates different stimuli for your body, and then that forces different adaptations over time. So it's not just about technique, it's not just about strength, it's also about defense mechanisms and understanding the biology behind how the body works. So
yeah, and I think like almost that same thing, only from a mental standpoint rather than like a physiological standpoint.
Yeah.
Like you just said, like just switching it up from a mental standpoint. Like if you're, we really try to throw all year round, and if you're doing that with the same shot, same exact thing every single day, it's gonna get boring. It's already throwing's already the
pretty
most
mundane.
exciting sport when training, but so the more you can switch it up, the more, like, honestly, I think a lot of us want to like compare every single throw to our PR, and especially for younger throwers who don't really have that like maturity to, see the long run and everything. I think throwing different shots and kind of seeing the marks in different shots, like it doesn't always, correlate to the competition shot, but just being able to like kind of go after like just a practice PR with one shot rather than always using the 16 or the 12 or the 4. I think that can be like on one hand switching it up, a fresh, practice, but also just kind of motivate you to keep training hard like through the off season too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point, because I feel like I tend to get stuck. For me as a coach, I get stuck in like the analytical perspective of physiology and how the body is responding, and I just think everybody should just shut their mind off and just deal with what we're dealing with. Like, hey, I'm throwing you this stimulus. If you shut your mouth and you shut your head and just do the work, it's gonna work. But then I forget that people have souls.
And I mean that's the whole thing. Like you've been how long have you been around throwing?
Yeah.
And you've seen like life cycles of throwers go through, and you've seen that it works out. You've seen it work out, and like even for you, like it took. I'm sure it took you a little while to realize that.
I still haven't realized it when I was done throwing.
And so like for especially like a high school or anybody who's only been throwing for even 3 or 4 years, like to have the confidence to know that it's gonna work out.
It's tough.
It's hard to have that long-term vision.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's extremely important, especially for long-term success. It's got to just keep the mindset in the back of your head and understand that. Mm-hmm. I think that's why I failed as a thrower. All right, so that's the last question for this week's episode of the Throws Show. I'm still confused. Is it the Throws Show or the Throws Show? Yeah. Throw show. All right, so tune in next week, and we will have. I don't know when this is going to get released. We still need to talk to our producer about that. But whenever you listen to the next one, that'll be the 3rd episode.
Well said.
Peace.